You're live.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you very much for joining us for this great Hyperledger Aries JavaScript workshop. And I'm really pleased to have Berend and Karim join us today to go through the work that they're doing in the Hyperledger experience. And so what I'd like to say is we're going to try a little bit of pushing you into the Discord channel. So if anyone hasn't picked up the Discord link here, where we can look toward engagement in the Hyperledger Discord channel, I'm going to repost it right now. And then what I'd like to also do is just offer, if you don't have access to Discord, go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to speak, or go ahead and post into the Zoom chat if you'd like to go ahead and pose a question to either one of them. And then what I'd also like to do is, make sure that, we're live streaming this event on YouTube, and it'll be available on the Hyperledger YouTube channel after the event. And so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Berend and Karim to go through what they're going to do as far as a showcase of the Aries JavaScript ecosystem. And definitely feel free to join in and ask questions as we move along here, because this workshop is definitely an interactive experience and we want to really get engagement here. And then if you have any specific questions that you want to post in the chat, I'll make sure that we address them as we move along as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Berend and Karim and let them go forward. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, John, and thank you to everybody who has joined in. Apparently, there's quite some interest to this. It's cool to see. I will try to keep an eye on the chat while we're doing this presentation, because the first part will be a presentation, and then after that we will try to we will demo you something, and we will do Berend will do a live coding session. But John, please, if I'm missing any question or any questions, yeah, don't hesitate to jump in.
Sure. I'll monitor everything as well, and then if I see anything come through, I'll definitely ask you about it.
Perfect. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A as well. So if there are any questions left, then we'll gladly answer them. So yeah, once again, thank you all for joining. It's good to see that there's so much interest in this. Actually next to me, but you can see that it's Berend Sliedrecht, and I'm Karim Stekelenburg, and we are both, we work at Animo Solutions. And we are here to talk to you about how to make decentralized identity easy, or at least easier. And we'll do that by showcasing the Aries, or Hyperledger Aries JavaScript ecosystem. So a little bit, can you, yeah, a little bit about us. Again, we're from Animo Solutions. Our company is about 2 years old. A little over 2 years. We're based in Utrecht, the Netherlands, and currently we build SSI solutions, and we help other companies to build SSI solutions. So we also do a bit of consultancy. Our main mission is to drive the adoption of self-sovereign identity. So that's also one of the reasons that we're here. From the beginning, from the moment we started this company, we've been mostly active in the Hyperledger Aries community, and more specifically, we try to focus on Hyperledger or Aries Framework JavaScript. I don't know if this works. Yeah, so very short agenda for today. I'm not sure if everybody knows what self-sovereign identity is. I'm assuming that most do, but for those who don't, I will quickly introduce the concept of self-sovereign identity and why we think we need that. Then a short introduction on what Hyperledger Aries is per se, or exactly is. I can imagine that a lot of you come from other Hyperledger projects, such as Fabric, so a small or short introduction I think would be good. Too much background noise, yeah. maybe you can ask them to. Yeah. Yeah, we're on it. Thank you. We'll shortly give an introduction on what Hyperledger Aries is exactly. Then we'll go into the JavaScript framework itself. And we'll after that we'll give you a small demo on how does a solution look like that is actually built with Aries Framework JavaScript. We'll go a bit over the documentation that is fairly new, and Berend at the end will do a live coding session, because the whole point of this presentation, of the session, workshop, however you might call it, is to show you that SSI can actually be quite easy. Now we're both doing it. So a short introduction on self-sovereign identity, and I think because it's basically a decentralized model for digital identity. I hope so too. And I think it's good to show the need of self-sovereign identity by going over what the previous models or how we have handled digital identity in the past. So the most common model, I think everybody knows, is the username password model, or the siloed model. Here you for every interaction with or every relationship you maintain digitally, so that could be with Twitter, with Google, with your bank, whatever, you use something that's called a shared secret, which is a shared secret is just basically a fancy word for something like a password. So if I register at a certain website, for instance, I give them a little secret, usually a password, and the next time I come around, they will ask me for a secret. I will give them that secret, and based on that, they trust that I am the same person who previously registered with that secret. Now, there are a lot of downsides here. I think they are pretty known. It requires us to manage a lot of credentials. You preferably don't use the same password for everything, which sadly is the result often. So if you would do it the right way, you would have to manage a lot of different credentials, different passwords. But it also, and this is something that a lot of people I think is overlooked a lot, is that it requires every organization to, in a way, be a security expert. Like, you're giving them some sensitive information, so they need to be able to protect that. And well, the examples on this slide here are Facebook, Twitter, and Google. You can assume that they have that in place, but a small web shop might not. Okay, so the next step is another model, the federated model, also known as the identity provider model or single sign-on. I think most of you have also heard or seen or even used this yourselves. Here we put a third party in between the interaction. So you basically have a three-way relationship now. You don't interact directly when it comes to authentication with the website you want to go to, but you use an identity provider. For instance, Google has Google login, Facebook has Facebook login, I believe, and they say, you know what, just let us handle all this identity stuff, so you don't have to bother about it or deal with it. We will do that for you. So you authenticate with Google, and if everything is all right, Google will tell the website you're trying to interact with, hey, this indeed is, in my case, Karim. Which is it's a step forward, because now we don't have to manage all these credentials. We just have one or a few. The identity provider, again, in this case, in this example, that's Google, has to handle the sensitive data. So it doesn't require everybody to be a security expert in that sense, but it has major downsides as well. We basically place a third party between every interaction we have. So in this example, every time we log in to a certain website using Google, Google knows about it. and we all know that they are they love to have the data, and they're not always too ethical with it. It also has the downside that now you're using basically one shared secret, the one with Google, for multiple relationships. So that secret becomes more valuable. If somebody cracks my Google account, now they have access to many, many services, whereas previously they wouldn't. And I think probably in the decentralized world, the most important one is we have a intermediate party. We're not communicating peer to peer, and that party potentially could say, no, we don't like Karim anymore. So if I'm trying to log in, they just say no. So you give an external party the power to deny access to certain services, which is it's a bad thing, obviously. So there are more models. We won't go over all of them, but this gives a somewhat of an overview, I think, of how digital identity worked and still works in a lot of cases. So self-sovereign identity. Now, this is not going to be a super accurate explanation. It's definitely not going to cover all of the aspects because there are many. But in essence, I often use the example of a passport. So physical identity. If you think about physical identity, you receive a passport or an identification card from the government. In this case, we call the government the issuer because they issue you a passport, and you are in control over the passport. You have that with you, and you decide who sees the passport and who doesn't. So if I have to fly, usually customs will ask me for my passport. I can disclose that to them, but it's not under control of another party like the previous models had. So in a sense, it also really gives back control over your identity to you. It gives you the control. You decide what happens with your identity or your documents or credentials. Like both models partly also did, it removes the need for managing loads of passwords because you don't need them. And you remove the intermediate party. So in this case, as seen on the graphic, somebody gives you a credential. Again, in the example I just mentioned, that's the government. We call the government the issuer. You get the credential and you hold it. So we call you the holder. And if I go to customs, they verify the credential. So we call them the verifier. Now, a very important thing is it's decentralized. So we don't have vendor lock-in. It's not that we use some kind of service, and if that service goes down, we now are not able to identify ourselves to others. It's decentralized, so whatever vendor party comes and goes, we should be okay. SSI, or self-sovereign identity, is based on open standards, very important. And the two most notable ones are decentralized identifiers, which are basically, you can view them sort of as URLs for entities, for things. So a URL you put into your browser takes you to a certain document online. This identifies a thing, a person, an animal, etc. And the most important one, I think, or they're both very important, but very interesting second one is the verifiable credential, which is basically a document, a digital document, which has all kinds of cryptographic magic in it, which makes it secure. In essence, there are, I think, three main things a verifiable credential can assure you of. One is cryptographically, that is. One is, so as a verifier, if I get a credential from a holder, one thing I can be sure of is that it was actually issued by the issuer that I'm seeing. Oh, oops. That is written down in the credential. Secondly, I can be pretty sure that it's issued to the holder, so to the person that's giving me the credential. And lastly, that person didn't alter any information, because you can imagine if somebody gives me a passport and they alter their age, now they have different rights. So that is SSI in very short. There's lots more to it, but we are trying to move on. So then, what is Hyperledger Aries? Well, it's this is a Hyperledger meetup, so most of you know what Hyperledger is, I think. But Hyperledger Aries is the decentralized identity project under the whole Hyperledger umbrella, and it sort of is part of what I call, I don't know if that is an official term, but the Hyperledger identity stack. SSI sometimes, not always, but usually relies on a blockchain. The blockchain side of things is another Hyperledger project, which you see all the way at the bottom. That's Hyperledger Indy, and we use that to register some data that has to be immutable. Then we have Hyperledger Aries itself, and Hyperledger Aries is basically a set of standards that define how software should or can work, and specifically software that is meant to handle all these credentials. So it's really a set of standards you can use and follow to create Hyper or SSI software, because as you can imagine, doing all these cryptographic calculations out of your head is a bit tedious. So we need software for that, and Hyperledger Aries defines standards to create that software. All the way on the left, we see Hyperledger Ursa, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. It's a crypto library, also under the Hyperledger umbrella. And both Hyperledger Aries and Hyperledger Indy rely on Hyperledger Ursa for their crypto stuff. So it went. To quickly summarize, so what is Hyperledger Aries itself? It's a suite for creating self-sovereign identity agents. And agents is if we have a piece of software that does self-sovereign identity interactions for us, we call that an agent. And it's important to note that it is not a technical implementation itself. It's a set of standards. So it's a set of RFCs, a set of protocols that are written down, and they can be used to create technical implementations. And there are various technical implementations out there that follow these standards that are listed below. We have Aries Cloud Agent Python, which is a server that can be used to which exposes a REST API you can call to perform self-sovereign identity actions, let's say. There are various frameworks that are listed below that you can use to really create your own SSI solutions using Hyperledger Aries. Can I hear it? So one of the frameworks.
A couple of questions there.
Okay.
Karim, you want to maybe just touch base on the questions that were posted in the chat real quick? Just so we're kind of covering those as we go along. I know we're going to have Q&A at the end, but maybe just touch base on those.
Yeah. So I see one is, hi, how does the verifier make sure the credentials are legit? So that is for me a bit too much to explain, because I'm not a cryptographic genius, but there are all kinds of cryptographic things in a verifiable credential. So you usually all base it on signatures, on cryptographic signatures, and a verifier can check if a signature was made by a certain DID, in this case, the issuer DID. So when the credential is issued, it is signed by the issuer, And when the credential then is presented by the holder to a verifier, they can check, was this actually signed by the issuer? That is written down there. If you alter the information that is in the credential, the signature would be invalid. I hope that answers your question. Let me see. Multi-chain work in Aries. We'll go over that quickly later. But in essence, we are trying to slowly implement other to integrate with other chains than Indy, because as mentioned, in this slide, Hyperledger Indy is an identity-specific blockchain, but there are many other blockchains that can be used for the same. Right now, we are mainly still tied to Hyperledger Indy, but we're working hard to integrate it with other ledgers. Let's say Fabric or Check is a new player in the game. So we're working on that. Let me see. We have a few other ones. Recovery is still of credentials. So the question here says credentials are stored somewhere on a phone or wherever on a server, but what if you lose those credentials and all the cryptographic keys that go along with it? This is a difficult question. There are a lot of projects that are working on this, that try to solve this, but indeed, right now, I guess the way to get your credentials back is a bit silly, which is just ask to get those credentials reissued. But there are various solutions in the making. So zero knowledge proofs. I see a question on zero knowledge proofs. And Berend just answered it. So yeah, indeed, zero knowledge proofs, for those who don't know, is I could present the credential to, or proof of the credential to a verifier. For instance, the verifier asked me, am I older than 21? And zero knowledge proof is a way to basically prove that without disclosing my birth date or my age. So they basically get a Boolean that says yes, no, and they are able to trust this. Again, cryptographic magic. I hope that answers your question. And we do have a credential format, the Indy credential format, or unknown creds that does support that. Cool. I will now, I think, go on, just for the sake of time. Yeah, so that was Hyperledger Aries. Now we are here, obviously, to talk about Hyperledger Aries or Aries Framework JavaScript, which is, again, the JavaScript implementation of Hyperledger Aries. Oops, there we go. So why did we choose this framework as a company, as opposed to all the other ones that are out there? And that has mostly to do with our mission, which I mentioned previously at the beginning, is we want to drive adoption of self-sovereign identity. Like, we believe it's something that will really make the world a better place. Hate the term, but there we go. So for self-sovereign identity to really take off, non-SSI developers have to be able to understand it. Right now, it's really complex. But if you think about it, like, identity is everywhere. Every app uses some form of identity. Most websites do. So it's everywhere. And the developers of these websites are not. It's not their core business to do identity stuff. So they don't want to spend half a year or more to learn this stuff and to be able to use it. So they usually fall back to the other models we just discussed, because they're just easier. We think it has to be easy. We have to make self-sovereign identity easy, at least as easy as possible, for it to really become something. And JavaScript is among or the most popular language out there. I think still, according to Stack Overflow, the most popular one. So a lot of developers know it or have worked with it, maybe not worked every day with it, but so it's not, people don't have to learn Rust first in order to do this kind of stuff and to implement it into their apps, but they can just use something they're used to. Secondly is with frameworks or solutions like React Native, Node.js, you can use JavaScript on multiple platforms. So using React Native, we can write SSI solutions for mobile apps, so both Android and iOS. But you can use that same framework to make server-side solutions, which I think is really valuable. You don't have to learn 3 frameworks in order to get your SSI stuff done. So that is something we value a lot, and that's in the end why we chose the JavaScript framework. So this is a bit vague because we are using the term JavaScript of Aries Framework JavaScript and Aries JavaScript ecosystem through another, but it started with Aries Framework JavaScript, and the framework and things around it have gained quite some traction lately. So we have some other things outside of the framework itself that emerged. As you can see in the figure on the screen, here is in blue we have the framework itself. So the framework contains a core package, which has all the SSI functionality you need in order to create connections between 2 parties, to exchange credentials, all that goodness. Then we have 2 packages that are really platform specific. So we have a React Native package and a Node.js package. They basically contain all the dependencies you would need depending on the platform you're working in. So if you are going to make a React Native app, you would install the core package and the React Native dependencies package. The same for Node, but then you would obviously use the Node package. Down one step down in red, we have the Aries Framework JavaScript extensions. It's another repository, and that basically contains stuff that would help us to do common things, but not so common that they belong in the core of the framework. So for instance, if you want to have a REST API around your agent, we have an extension you can plug into the framework that gives you a REST API. The same for if you're creating a React Native solution, so a mobile wallet or app, and you'd like to have some push notification support, there is an extension for that. Then we have Aries Mobile Agent React Native in, I guess, pink or purple, I don't know, which is basically it's again another repository. It's an open source agent, React Native agent that is built on top of Aries Framework JavaScript. So it's a white label app, so you could just clone it, put your own theme in it, and give it your own feel. But you can also use it obviously as a reference if you're creating your own mobile agent based on Aries Framework JavaScript. And last but not least, documentation, which is quite important. We have noticed, but we'll go over that a bit later. So okay, that's all good and nice. That was a little introduction on the ecosystem. But let's see it in action. So what can we actually do with this stuff? Berend, if you can help me. So we have, or one of my, lovely colleagues made a demo, which you can, if you want to follow along, you can. The setup takes a bit of time because you need to download the wallet, but It's a website that you can use to get a credential issued to you and then present that credential to others. It's quite, Berend is trying to fix some technical issues here because we're trying to stream my phone as well. Isn't it working? Try it again. Anyway, thank you for the brilliant demo comment. Yeah, I think it's a very nice demo. It's you can choose multiple use cases. So you can choose a role. All right. You can choose a character, and the character has a little bit of a story behind it. So one is a student, one is the, okay, it's not going to work like this, then I have to just show it in the camera, which is terrible, but I will have to do that. So, okay, the streaming of my phone to the screen doesn't work, so forgive us, please. But so this is the demo. You can visit it yourself or do it later. It's demo.animo.id. And the first thing it will tell us is to run through the setup, which basically means to do this you need a phone with a wallet on it. And now there are two wallets here. They're both not made by us. One is Strinsic, probably a familiar company, and the other is Lizzie Wallet, which is made by a German company. You can use either of those, doesn't really matter. So I will go for Lizzie. In this case, I present you with a QR code if that sends you to the store. If you want to download it, I already have it, so I want to do that. And now it's asks you to pick a character. I will take Jan for this, which is a student, and there's a little, I don't know, little storyline behind it. So the first thing we need is a credential. It will issue us a Animo ID card, we call it, but it basically tries to simulate a base credential you would normally get from the government, or something that states your name and your age, for instance. Let me see. So the first thing we need to do is create a, because it's peer-to-peer, I have my phone here. The website runs a server with an agent, and we need to create a connection. I already was connected, so but by scanning that QR code, it basically creates a connection between my phone and the other. Now going on, it says great, we are connected. So it will now tell us, I will give you a starter credential. Let me see. So in my wallet, I received a credential, which is really hard to see for you probably, but believe me, I received a credential, and I can now, so it first gave me a notification, hey, this person wanted to send you a credential, and I accept the credential. I don't know why it keeps hanging here. Let's run through this quickly again. Yeah. Okay, let's take Joyce for now. So now I'm going to scan the QR code again for the connection. Great, we are connected. I have a connection with Animo. And okay, now it's visible here. I have two little notifications saying, hey, I want to give you these credentials. In this case, because it's another use case, it gave us two, the Animo ID card, so the base ID, and a credit card we can use, and I will accept them both. And as you can see on the screen, it says that I accepted it. And there goes the other one. Boom. So I have both in my wallet now. I can go on to the next step, and now it basically gives me a few options. So a few routes in this example, and it also lists. You'll be asked for this credential, this credential, this credential. In this case, I will just take the conference example. Gives me a little overview. You're connecting with this fictional company or organization, you'll need to present this, and in return for presenting that, you'll get a conference pass that says that you are enrolled into the conference. So now again, this is another party, so we'll need to set up a connection. I will scan it again. Come on. Boom. There we go. So it needs some information, blah, blah, blah. It will now ask for that information. Again, I have a little notification here. It asks me, it's a shame I cannot show this to you, but on screen. But basically it's telling me, okay, this TechCon 2022 would like to have 2 pieces of information from you, your name and your nationality. So I can now say send, it's fine. And as you can see, that just appeared here. So the first step was the issuer. Now they just verified us. And now this conference becomes the issuer of another pass. And again, I have a little notification and I can accept it. Now, there are more and more, way more steps in this demo we could do, but for the sake of time, I will stop here. How do we go back to the presentation? There. Yes. But as you can see, I hope this gave you sort of an introduction on how this looks. So in this case, the app was not built because we're using a third-party app. This was not built with Aries Framework JavaScript, but it could have been an app that was built with this framework. And the website you saw ran the framework, so it was built with Node.js. So Berend will now, so now you have an introduction to the framework. I hope you have an idea of what it has, and Berend will now go over the current state of the framework and look, give you a slight look of the roadmap ahead. So Berend,
yes,
take it away.
So with the Aries ecosystem and every framework, we basically, how we implement the frameworks are according to RFCs, which Karim mentioned before, the Aries RFCs, and these basically define how it can communicate with other agents. There are many RFCs. Now there are a lot of standards. They have different versions, different implementations, and we found out that it would be a good idea to create a profile, which is just a set of RFCs which an agent should implement to be compliant with AIP 1.0, which is the Aries interop profile, which is right here. So this basically just defines a specific set of RFCs and their version, what they should implement in order to be compliant with this. And this just means that if you have an Aries Cloud Agent Python Aries agent and a Aries Framework JavaScript agent, that if they both comply to the AIP1 spec, they can talk to each other and they can exchange information without being the exact same framework. So I'll talk about the features like in context of AIP. So right now, AFJ is fully compliant with the AIP 1.0 spec, which means it supports DITCOM v1, which is a communication specification based on decentralized identifiers. We also support the issuance of credential and the proof presentation v1. This just means what you just saw in the demo, that someone gives you a based credential like Animo, and then TechCon wants to get this information, aka present the proof. We also support the connection protocol, which is the first step in a demo actually, where you set up a connection with the other agent or TechCon, and that way you get a channel in which you can talk to each other. We do already support some features of AIP 2.0, which includes issue credential v2. So that's the improved version of it. This allows for a lot more Credential formats, but we currently only support the Indie credential format, which is the same used in the issue credential v1 protocol. We're working hard with everyone in the AFJ community to support the JSON LD credentials defined by W3C, but that is coming in the next slide. We also support out-of-band and did exchange. Out-of-band simply means here is that in order for us to establish a secure channel between two agents that we can use to talk to each other, we first have to send one message that is not in this channel to establish that communication channel. And that exchange just means the communication between the two agents within the channel, so when it is established. In order to fully test the AIP specs, so the 1.0 and the 2.0, we created, or as in the Aries community created, the Aries agent test harness, which is quite a nice test harness, which just tests all the framework against each other. So this basically gives us a way to check the interoperability between different agents, because sometimes you can implement a spec and understand it in the different way, implement it incorrectly, and then you're actually not completely following the specification, and this would break interop. So we test it every night to make sure that the agents are still compliant with each other. One of the biggest features of AFJ is that it simply supports the React Native environment and the Node.js environment. This would mean that you can create a mobile agent like bifold, or you can create a RESTful API like we used in the demo before that is running in the Node.js environment. This really allows us to capture the entire ecosystem of software while still containing in like one code base and keeping it very consistent between the different implementations. So in the future, as of like today and a couple of weeks before, we're already working on it. Now we're working on issue credential v2, like I said before, with LD proofs and BBS plus signatures. This is something that will greatly improve the interoperability between non-Aries agents. This is also something that we're working towards to not only be interoperable with other Aries agents, but with any kind of self-sovereign identity agent that you can think of. We're also working on percent proof v2. This includes the Indie credentials, as mentioned before, and the new LD proof credentials, so that we can also verify them. DITCOM v2 is also required for this. This is I'm not too sure on the details, but this is just the improved version of DITCOM v1 with some benefits and generalization. Outside of the AIP 2.0 spec, we also want to just improve the framework. This includes multi-tenancy. So if you want to, for example, create a SaaS platform, so software as a service, then you could have one single agent instance that could create infinite amount of wallets, for example, for people that want to use this platform. So if someone signs up, creates an account, and they can get a wallet, they can do SSI interactions, they can issue credentials, they can receive credentials, they can do whatever they want with it, but it's managed by another entity, and it allows you to provide this as a service. We also found that the AFJ is starting to become quite bulky in terms of dependencies that we use. For example, for the BBS plus credentials, we have a dependency. For Indie, we have a separate dependency. And we noticed that not every implementation needs all the specific dependencies. So we're trying to modularize the framework so that you can basically pick and choose from like, okay, I want to support BBS and LD proofs, but I don't want Indie because because I don't want to have any specific reason what you want. So this would allow us to have a bit more plug and play framework. And we're also looking towards integrating with more blockchains. This would include like the checked network, for example, what Karim mentioned before. And I believe some party is working on Fabric support. So that would also be really nice. I mean, there are tons of other blockchains that we would like to integrate with. So that is definitely on the roadmap to just make it add support for as many as possible, so we could, be interop again with even more standards. That's kind of the goal here. That is kind of the most, the big features on the roadmap. What is also more on the roadmap is to improve again the usability of the framework, and with that, of course, comes documentation. So a couple of weeks ago, we decided to get started on that, and now Karim will go back and show you the documentation website that we've created.
Well, I mean, the documentation website, I will just a screenshot here. The URL is there as a subtitle. Yeah, so one of the things when we were introduced, or when we started with the whole Aries ecosystem, one thing we noticed immediately, it is one, very complex. Like these RFCs, if you're not used to them, and just come from university like we did, that is very complex. And then you just those just describe the standards themselves. Then you also have the frameworks. So every framework obviously is built a little differently. Yeah, one of the things we struggled with a lot is that there was very no documentation at all, or outdated, or which makes it very difficult for people to get started, basically. And well, again, the whole point, or our mission is to drive adoption in this ecosystem. So definitely solid documentation will help with that. We have also seen from our community that has grown a lot lately, that they struggle with this. You have to dive through the code, which is not always the best way, or to get started really fast. So indeed, as Berend mentioned a few weeks ago, we started writing documentation. So we recently, I think yesterday, this website came online, which is basically, it tries to be a sort of one-stop shop for any documentation you might need on not just a framework, but anything inside of the ecosystem. It is really new, really incomplete. So we're still it's still under heavy development, so don't expect too much. But the whole idea behind this documentation is not to just give API docs, not like, okay, here you have this function and it wants these parameters and these arguments. No, we want to really put it in a more of a hands-on tutorial way. So here we have a little screenshot of issue credential. Issue credential is a use case that a lot of people making SSI solutions want. It's something that is quite common in SSI to issue a credential. So we try to write this documentation in a sort of tutorial fashion. So this is what you need to get set up. These are the snippets with obviously an explanation on what they do, but guiding you through the most common practices. And we hope to extend this over time with also more advanced use cases, et cetera, et cetera. So really more in a tutorial ish way. Please don't look at the colors here. They're terrible. We're working on them. But no, the colors indicate the different sides, because we in an issue credential interaction, you obviously have the issuer and the holder. So the issuer sends a credential or issues a credential to the holder. So they both need a piece of software, and that's why these code blocks are colored differently to indicate the roles. But yeah, again, this is not perfect at all. And if anyone would like to dive into the AFJ or Aries JavaScript ecosystem, especially beginners, your remarks and comments are more than welcome, because as we have been working with this framework for about three years now, it's not always obvious what is not obvious to people who are starting out. I think that sort of covers it for the presentation side of things. Berend will now go on to the live coding session. So he will demonstrate how sort of easy, hopefully easy, it is to create an issuer, right? In this case.
Yeah, I'll create an issuer. Can you mute? Yeah, thank you. So we're gonna create an issuer, and it was supposed to talk with the mobile agent, which we're still gonna do. But yeah, we're gonna do the same thing again with the webcam, so it might look a bit weird, but we'll try our best. Let's see. So there we go. Just have to set everything up correctly, and yes, we can go. So right here, I have a completely empty project, just one file in there, which is an agent. In here is just some simple boilerplate functions or code, which is not really that important. It contains a Genesis transaction of the ledger that we want to connect to. We're setting the logs on because we want to, show a bit more of what the framework is doing. There's an agent label, so that's what other people can see when they connect with your agent. There's some auto acceptance, so this way we can make the flow a bit easier. We don't have to accept every step of the flow. We just issue a credential and it's done. This is the ledger that we're connecting with. This is our public DID seed. On this seed is our public DID based. You can use it. It's a test network, so there's no secrecy here. And we're using an ngrok tunnel here right now because we're using a local server, so we have to expose it to the public so that our mobile agent can connect with it. And here we're just registering some outbound and inbound transports. This is our way of communicating. So first, I'm going to add some dependencies, which is the Aries frame. I hope it's visible for everyone. It's not too small. If so, then please mention it and I'll increase my font size.
Looks good to me, Berend.
Okay, thank you. So I added the core dependency and a node dependency because we're in a node environment right now. And I will also add the QR code terminal dependency. This is basically just printed the QR code in the terminal. It's a very verbose name. So just pulling the dependencies in. And now, as you can see, there are a couple of dependencies in JavaScript, the standard way. So this is something that we really want to improve, that we don't have to pull that many dependencies in, and that it will take a lot quicker, and that the final server package is smaller. We also have to add the types dependency because we do everything in TypeScript. Aries Framework JavaScript is also written in TypeScript, just something that we forgot to mention. So right here in the index, we will pull in the get agent from the agent file. In here, we will create a simple main function in which we can define all our cool code. In this function, first we have to get our agent, which is just agent. Get agents with a label, which will be Hyperledger issuer demo. Okay, so now that we have our agents, we will have to create a schema on the ledger. And this schema basically defines how our credential is going to look like with which attributes. So we can create it like this: schema, await agent dot ledger, because it's a ledger interaction, and we're going to register the schema. In here, we can specify some attributes. So here we can say name and age, a very standard identity credential. Yeah. The name of our schema will be Hyperledger issuer demo schema it's not really important what it is right now. So now that we have created our schema, we have to create a credential definition, which does a lot more than what I'm saying right now, but it basically binds the schema to a specific key pair, so that if you want to check like, hey, did this specific issuer issue this credential to a holder, then you can use the credential definition to check that if the issuer actually issued that credential, and it's not like my mother issuing me my identity instead of the government, because that would be quite weird. So here we'll have the credential definition and can agent ledger interaction. So credential definition. In here we have to pass in the schema. We do not support verification right now, or we're not going to support verification for this, but that's where you would put it if you support verification for this credential definition. After this, we have to create the invitation, which will be an out of band record and the invitation. And it will be done on agent.oob, which stands for out of band, of course. And we'll create a legacy invitation. We're creating a legacy invitation here and not like the newest invitation, is because our wallet that we're going to use for this does not support, is not AIP2 compliant. So we have to use the old connections protocol. And that's why we also have a separate invitation here. So in order to pass the invitation to the mobile agent, we have to get the URL from it, because we can send URLs then to other agents. And from this URL, we have to create a QR code. So we will do invitation.toURL, and the domain doesn't really matter here. So I will just use https.example.org. And now we have a URL which contains our invitation. In order to, of course, send it to the mobile site, we have to create a QR code. So we can use QR code to generate with the URL. Just have to import it quickly. QR code terminal. And now, now we can send the connection and we basically have a connection, but we need some events to check when the connection is completed so that we can issue the credential. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'll just have to, yes, I'll create a function, which is connection listener, and we'll take an agent and an ID, which will be the out-of-band ID, and it will return a promise, which will resolve with the connection ID. That's which we can then use to issue the credential. Hopefully it will all make sense when I type it out. So agents, and we have to do events on, and then here we can say the connection, let's see, states. Oh, sorry, the connection event types. And because we use TypeScript, we need some typing for our properties. So we add a generic that says connection states changed event. Here we have to define a function which will be called whenever a credential record is updated. So it can go from like different state to another state, and then go to the state completed. And then when it's completed, we want to issue them a credential. So right here, first we will check if the event is actually from our out-of-band record. So we'll do out-of-band ID. If it doesn't equal the ID that we pass in, that we got from the invitation, we'll just simply return. And if it does, then we'll go to the payload again, which contains the connection record. Then we'll do is ready, which basically says if this connection is ready, we will resolve this promise. And then it will contain the payload.connectionRecord.id. So right here, after creating the QR code, we're going to wait. Gonna wait for a long time until the connection is completed. So here with the connection listener, contain agent, and the out of band record.id. So after this line of code, we will have a established connection that is ready to be issued something. And here again, we'll do agent, credentials, and we will offer a credential. So in this again, we have to define some properties, which we can see is the connection ID. We can get the credential for the protocol version. Again, because the wallet that we're going to use is not AOP2 compliant, we're going to use the V1 protocol. And then we have the credential formats. So in this credential format, we will see Indy, because we're going to use an Indy credential, which will contain a credential definition ID, which is what we created before. And it also contains some attributes. These attributes are actually just the fields of the credential, what you want to give to someone. So the name would be the same as in the schema, which would be my name. And then the value would be, well, my name, of course. The name here would be age, and here value would be 23, because that's how young I am. For the connection ID, we need some typing, so I just have to add the return type here. Okay, now to quickly go over it again, we created the schema, we created the credential definition, then we created a connection with a QR code to communicate with a mobile agent. We get the connection ID, and then we offer a credential. And if I did not make any mistakes, we have a very simple issuer service now. For this part, I have to take my terminal to a very small font size. I'm sorry, it's very difficult to read it now, but the QR code, how it's rendered in the terminal, it's quite big. So here I will start the project with TS Node, and Karim will be the person interacting with the wallet, and we'll hopefully show you the credential in the end. So I'll start it. Here's some debug information to see that's actually doing something. It just registered the credential definition of the schema, and there's the big QR code. Karim is now trying to scan it, but QR codes are always difficult. Yeah, okay, so there's a connection. And in this mess of logs, it says that there's a credential issued. Let's see if I can, yeah. Let's see if I can show it actually. Yeah, here it says offer message successfully created, and we've offered a credential. You can mute.
So on the other side, I have a little request. I hope you can see it, but it has the same information. So it has the Berend and for the name value, and the 23 for the age value, which I can now accept or decline. I just accepted it, and it is now in my wallet. I have a credential. That is amazing. So
that was the that was the live coding example. I hope everyone saw that it was relatively easy. I think around like 60 lines of code, excluding the agent, of course, to just set up a whole issuer, which is able to issue valid, verifiable credentials. And well, for production, of course, you need some code on top of it, but it shows that it's a fairly easy API, and it's not a lot of complex code. And it is also, of course, our main goal with AFJ is to just make it easy, interoperable, and everything that you want to use. This was our presentation on the Aries JavaScript ecosystem. Hopefully you've all learned something and would like to get started with SSI development and choose AFJ as your entry point for SSI development. And any further questions we can answer right now, I think. I see there are some in the chat. or not? Did you answer them, Karim?
Awesome.
Yeah, I think you guys have done a great job of addressing all the questions as we've gone along here. So now I would just say let's go ahead and open it up for maybe live Q&A. So it looks like there's a question about how does it compare to other SSI frameworks, SSI. So maybe you want to just address that one.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with a lot of SSI frameworks outside of Aries, but mainly the, of course, Timo. But yeah, right now we're mainly focused on the Aries specification, so I can't myself really give a concrete comparison to other frameworks. We are definitely trying to move more towards being interoperable with them and creating less of a difference between them. So for me, at least, it's very difficult to say what the comparison is. Maybe cutting us something.
I mean, I'm not so familiar with other frameworks either, but I guess we follow the Aries standards. So Aries defines a lot of standards that are to do certain things. So, okay, if we're going to issue a credential, various messages are exchanged. Which messages, what do those messages contain, et cetera, et cetera. How is a credential structured? Everybody can think of their own structure, but that wouldn't work because we're not interoperable. And so Aries sort of is I guess an umbrella of these standards. And I guess other frameworks implement their own standards outside of the Aries ecosystem, or in the Aries ecosystem, because they're kind of tightly coupled. A lot of people are relying on W3C verifiable credentials. So that's a verifiable credentials standard using JSON LD defined by W3C, which well, W3C obviously defines a lot of the standards we use every day. So I think that's the big difference. We follow mostly, or we have followed mostly Aries standards, and are now moving towards W3C standards to also incorporate those, and other solutions have their own standards. What I think is good about Aries is that there are multiple implementations that all follow the same standards. So at least these implementations are interoperable with each other. Instead of having one vendor somewhere creating a wallet that does things on the way they do things, and it's not interoperable with anyone else. I hope that answers the question. Any more questions? Yeah, please raise your hand or do it by voice or in the chat.
Yeah, I have a question for you just around the wallets that
Sure.
you showed earlier. I saw that, you know, you had Intrinsic wallet and then you had another wallet that was from Germany.
Yeah.
So is there any one that you prefer? And if there's one that you prefer, why is that? And, you know, are both of them active and engaged with the Aries community?
So, well, I mean, they are interoperable with our demo. So, yeah, they are Intrinsic, especially. I think they built the majority of the .NET framework, the Aries.NET framework. So that is built on top of that. I believe it's a Xamarin app. Lizzie, I'm not too sure what they use to build it, but definitely, yeah, they are interoperable also. I guess which one that you prefer more comes to the looks and feels and the features they support. We also, again, because we have these AIP, these Aries interop profiles that are that if everybody follows or implements the same, is compliant with the same profile, then it should be okay too. Then you should be interoperable. but as with standards, always not everybody does it exactly how it should have been done. So sometimes you notice a little difference, like, hey, okay, when I'm issuing a credential, it works and connections work, but presenting a proof, there's a little something went wrong, error there. But I guess like wallets, in the end, if they support the same functionality, it really comes to look and feel and what you prefer. As Akif in the chat,
let's ask another question, which is a good follow-up question to that. So there was mention about Aries bifold. So can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yes.
I think that's
so
great
Aries bifold,
thing to discuss here. Yep.
Definitely. So Akif is someone I know well from the Aries community. He works a lot on bifold. So Aries bifold is I think a little over almost 1.5 years old, I think. And it's an open source. Maybe Berend, you can look for the link and post it in the chat. Well, bifold was sort of the old name. Now the repository is called Aries Mobile Agent React Native, which also was in one of the slides. And that is an open source wallet, completely open source, built on AFJ. So it uses AFJ, only relies on AFJ for SSI stuff. And the cool thing is it's a white label app, so it's not tied to any company itself, but you can just clone it, you can customize it, and you can make your own wallet if you wanted to. We're trying, or the bifold community is trying to make it more customizable every day. So I believe now we have it's possible to provide your own theme. So it would be a little bit stupid if everybody using this project had exactly the same wallet with exactly the same look and feel. So bifold can be used to you can provide a theme to bifold to customize it a little bit, to give it your own colors and looks and feels. And I also think it's very valuable to look at bifold if you are planning to make your own, to start from scratch and make your own wallet using React Native, because it's just it's a good reference point. I hope that answers the questions. Thank you, Akif, for mentioning that, reminding me.
Okay, one of the things I just want to touch base on here with everyone is just after we wrap up this nice workshop here, anyone who wants to engage with the Aries JavaScript team, definitely go back on the Discord and really get involved. And I think they're always looking for new maintainers and people to help the project. So if you're interested, definitely reach out to them. They posted their emails here, and definitely go on to Discord. And if anybody wants to ask a specific question, then rather than go through chat, just feel free to raise your hand. I'll take you off mute and you can ask your question directly. And the other question I'll ask just both of you is, are there any specific development tasks or other things from a maintainer standpoint that you'd be interested in getting some help with? And maybe you can just let that know to the community here so that they can maybe get engaged with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of work to do. So we have been working lately on getting into AIP2, which is easier said than done. There's quite a lot of work involved in that. So definitely developers who want to contribute, but also, as I mentioned earlier, we are trying to make this thing as usable and easy for people outside of the SSI community. So we have this documentation stuff, and we really, especially people like who are coming into this space who don't know everything. I think it's very valuable to one, have comments on the documentation that is there, but it's also I think it's also great if people who are learning and who are discovering this works like this works like that, these people are also able to contribute because they are able to digest and this stuff and probably able to put it into simple terms, which becomes a bit more difficult if you've been in this space for a while. So definitely that, I think, documentation, but also what is the extension repository we have. It's basically a place for anything that is not really hardcore SSI itself, but is something that is interesting to other people. So let's say this push notification extension. A lot of people building wallets, mobile wallets, probably want push notifications. So also in that regard, if you have a nice idea or you think that I would like to build this, then you can definitely contribute on that side. I hope I'm answering the right question. But yeah, no, more help is always welcome. Regarding the framework itself, we have a weekly call on Thursdays. So today there was one, which if you're coming into this and you'd like to introduce yourself or ask questions, you can always do that. I don't know the exact times in all the time zones, but we can post a link to it later. So yeah, contributions are definitely welcome. Also from, let's say you are used to work with Hyperledger Fabric, for instance, or something else, or I don't know, Ethereum or something. That's also interesting because again, like we are now quite tightly coupled to Indy, but we'd like to expand that to other ledgers. So again, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it looks like there's a couple of new questions. I think Berend's kind of jumped into chat to answer them, but maybe if you want to just talk about them in the discussion as well.
Yeah, the first question was about versioning, and that is mainly being done by Timo on our team. I don't think that we have a very specific methodology for versioning and for releases and release channels. It's mainly been bundled breaking changes, so we don't like push breaking changes all the time, and bundle features. So you know, once you go one up, you get a good amount of features. Maybe Timo can, if he's here, at least can post a chat. Yeah, there we go.
Exactly.
So that is a guide for updating the agents to, if we break something in the storage, then like a records changes, then we need to update those records. And this guide helps you going through the process. And then let's see. Jean-Louis also asked a question about knowing whether an issuer is a bad actor, which is a very, very, very valid question. And is, how I understand it, is primarily just trust-based. An issuer has a public DID, which I showed in the agent configuration, and well, you have to check if that public DID is actually registered by an issuer that you trust. So, for example, our government here in the Netherlands, they would register their public DID, and they would be able to issue me a driver's license. And then if my coworker Karim would issue me, they would use different public DIDs, and therefore you would not trust the one that Karim issued me, of course. Yeah.
So just to go on that a little bit, like I think there's quite a good comment on this. It's not something that is solved by a framework or whatever. I mean, you're not gonna. This is of course, this is mainly, I guess, a blockchain community, but you're not in identity. You're not gonna get to a trustless scenario, and that's fine. You do take away a bit of trust, though. Like as a holder, if I receive a credential from an issuer, it doesn't really matter if I trust that issuer, yes or no. I get a credential, I can see what's inside it, and if he gave me, like, if he said my name is Berend, which is not, like, remember, that's him, and I'm Karim, and then I'll just throw that credential away. It does take away the for a good part, the trust that is needed between the holder and the verifier. Like, you don't have to trust this document. Now you can actually verify it cryptographically, which is a good thing. But then, and this is something you will, I guess, always have, is there's always a trust relationship between a verifier and the issuer. I think Berend covered it shortly during the coding example, but like, one credential, although it might contain the same information, so let's say the information that is typically in a passport, if it's issued by in my case the Dutch government, customs will probably trust that credential because they have a trust relationship. There's a trust relationship between the customs, so and the Dutch government. If I present the credential that was given to me by Berend, customs will probably be like, yeah, I don't know. So you're not gonna make it completely trustless, and it's not needed. But you take away a lot of the things, a lot of the issues where we have historically, in short history, just digital identity, used intermediate parties for. So, for instance, the Google, like the identity provider, but also I don't know. I think everybody is in another country here, but I mean, in Holland we have the government has an online environment where we can log in if we have to do taxes and stuff like that. You take that away. You don't need somebody else to prove who you are, because the verifier can trust what you gave to them is actually legit. So the verifier just has to trust the issuer now. And I hope that answers the question, Jean-Louis. If the issuer is the subject of the credential, there's no third party needed to trust. That's I need some time to wrap my head around this. It's a self-issued credential now. All right. Well, yeah, but I can do that. I could be an issuer. I could issue a credential to myself, but then what is the difference between me saying to customs, hey customs, I'm Karim, or showing them a signed credential that was signed by me? There's a Indian, no, the live coding example wasn't based on a local indie node, right? It used a test network, I believe.
Yeah, the testnet from BC Govern, which is always quite stable, and they clean it up sometimes maybe once per month or something. But yeah, you can, in the SDK guides, you can set up a local network relatively easily with Docker as well. But for this demo, we didn't. We just, then we would also have the wallet to support the local ledger. So we just chose for BC Govern because they always have quite stable networks.
That's an interesting comment. I will, again, I'll have to need some time to wrap my head around it, but can anyone write the schema to the BC network? I don't know what yeah, you can. You don't need any special privileges for that. You just need to set it up, I believe, with the Genesis transaction, right? You did it in the example. You can connect to it, and then you are free to upload the schema just like he did, and the credential definition as well. Yeah. By the way, Berend, somebody asked, or multiple people asked, if we could put this code in a repo so they can follow along later. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. Timo, of course. Timo, people of the SSI community or the Aries community, especially the Aries Framework JavaScript community. Now, Timo, yeah. Thank you, Timo, for that. I forgot that. Cool.
Okay, anyone have any other questions? We're coming up on the end of the time for this. So please feel free to post your remaining questions in here. And I do recommend that you get engaged with the community as well. So after we wrap up this call, it sounds like there's some follow-up here. And anyone who's on Hyperledger Discord right now, feel free to jump right into the Aries channel and then look up Aries JavaScript or Aries bifold, and you'll see both of those channels available in Discord.
Yeah, definitely. If not on Discord, feel free to send us an email. And I definitely, also for the people who are not planning to join the community, which is fine. If you wanna try this out for yourself, definitely try the demo again. I will. Can you post the URL? It's a public website. You can try it at home. It will guide you through downloading a wallet, and you can run through all the use cases just to get a feel of it. Yeah, indeed. Thank you all for listening and for being here. One last call for questions, I guess. And if not, then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, well, gentlemen, you did a wonderful job on this presentation. I really appreciate it. Looks like we've come to the end, and please go out to the Hyperledger YouTube channel if you'd like to watch any other portion of this video or any other videos on Hyperledger that would be relevant to the Aries network. So have a great day, everyone, and we'll catch up on the next workshop that we go through. Take care.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the invite.